$192 quintillion worth of platinum. The land was right here. Well, over here. An asteroid named 433 Eros. Not a single sovereign nation on Earth recognizes human claims to extraterrestrial real estate, but he did it anyway. And then, less than a year later, NASA landed a probe on the asteroid. They called it the first asteroid we had ever landed a probe on. Nimitz called it parking space number 29 and promptly sent NASA a $20 parking ticket. But so far, NASA and the US Attorney General have dismissed the fine, saying that his claim to own the asteroid is without legal merit. But why? Plenty of organizations exist that will gladly take your money in return for land on the moon, Venus, Mars. And if you had enough money to go to the moon, nothing is legally stopping you from moving there, building a house with a significant other, having some kids, and turning your moon house into a moon home. It wouldn't be trespassing or squatting or stealing. The 1979 Moon Treaty says that no one can own any part of outer space ever, but only 11 states have signed it. However, 129 nations have signed and or ratified the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which says that outer space is not subject to national appropriation. It says nothing about a private individual or a company owning part of outer space. But without the recognition and support of at least one sovereign nation, what does ownership really mean? I mean, I can claim anything I want. I can claim to own Prospect Park in Brooklyn. But just saying that I do, or even moving there and living in Prospect Park, wouldn't entitle me to the rights that usually go along with ownership, unless someone with a bunch of power agreed that I owned it and could enforce that ownership and keep others from claiming to also own it. In the past, explorers had few qualms about claiming to own land even if other humans were already there, because they had power on their side, namely plenty of guns, germs, and steel. To paraphrase con artist Canada Bill Jones, you know what beats 4 aces? A gun. Or as Loblob pointed out, McDonald's actually does serve breakfast after 10:30, if you have a gun. If you claimed some land on the moon as your own and moved in, would you also have to hire your own lunar police and cislunar military to defend it and to keep others from challenging your claim? Pretty much. That's kind of the problem. Currently, it is risky for individuals or corporations to claim and use extraterrestrial territory because the Outer Space Treaty says that outer space is the common heritage of mankind. It belongs to all of us, and only to all of us. Many interpretations of the Outer Space Treaty predict that powerful things like nations would be reluctant to come to your defense should someone else want to move in or cause trouble or dispute your extraterrestrial claim. Maybe you could get a sovereign nation to weigh in on your behalf by declaring universal jurisdiction, but that would need to be for an incredibly terrible, heinous crime, a crime against all of humanity, not just a dispute over a few space rocks. Catherine Dolderina from the Institute of Air and Space Law at McGill University suggests that considering outer space the common heritage of mankind has slowed space exploration. You see, the Outer Space Treaty was based on the Antarctic Treaty, which says that the entire continent shall never become the scene or object of international discord. Discord is not a good thing, but without an incentive to profit from it, not much has happened there, as opposed to the Arctic, where a resource boom is currently underway. If people felt safer appropriating and taking advantage of space, of celestial bodies, if technological development was more incentivized, would we already have orbiting tourist attractions and lunar hotels? Maybe, but here is what you can currently own in outer space. Stuff you put there, and to a certain extent, orbits. The Outer Space Treaty says that the stuff we left on the moon, anything put into space, remains property of the original owner forever. Orbits around Earth are temporarily granted by the International Telecommunication Union, a UN agency, but they don't work like typical real estate on Earth. When a group of equatorial nations attempted to claim orbits above their land boundaries without planning on putting satellites there, their claim was largely ignored. So you not only need to ask the UN for an orbit and get permission, you also need to use it and fill it. It's a little disappointing that we don't know how lunar real estate works, or if it will, but it's exciting to know that we, within our lifetimes, might have a chance to be part of the solution. A unique generation not visiting space for the first time, but homesteading it for the first time. Here's another unresolved space law quandary. If an alien landed in your backyard, intelligent life from beyond Earth, and you shot it with a gun, dressed it, and then cooked up you and your family some alien meat fajitas, would that be hunting or murder? We literally don't know. On Earth, we have human rights, but there are no alien rights. Maybe it would fall under the category of cultural vandalism, an act that's not necessarily illegal, but is a giant bummer to the rest of humanity. This has happened before, not with aliens, but with paintings. In 2003, the Chapman brothers purchased one of the few remaining sets of Goya's fantastic Disasters of War. Instead of displaying the works for the public, they defaced them by drawing clown and puppy heads on the people. They called the work Insult to Injury. In protest, a man threw red paint on Jake Chapman when he appeared at Modern Art Oxford, but at the end of the day, what the Chapman brothers did wasn't illegal. They owned the paintings. Vandalizing the moon or killing a peaceful alien aren't illegal acts, but just like defacing historical paintings, they seem wrong on some deeper level, especially because in most museums, you usually can't even touch the paintings. But who was the first person to touch the moon with their bare hands? I mean, the guys who walked around on the moon wore spacesuits. They had material in between their skin and the moon. Well, to be sure, you already have the moon in your hands. Well, little moons, lanula, the crescent-shaped area at the base of your fingernail where tissue is thicker and the red vascular structures underneath are more hidden, making it white. And to be even more sure, at the quantum level, touch is problematic. As I've covered before, atomically speaking, matter never really contacts other matter in the conventional sense. You can't truly touch anything. Minute physics called it interaction over a short distance. With that in mind, NASA says that Terry Slezak was the first person to touch the moon with his bare hands. He was a technician in quarantine who accidentally got lunar soil smeared all over his hand while removing film magazines from the astronauts' cameras. But when Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the lunar module after their moonwalk and removed their helmets, they came into contact with lunar dust they'd tracked in on their suits. They even reported its odor, saying it smelled of spent gunpowder or ashes, possibly because it oxidized on contact with the air in the cabin. Point is, the first few breaths of moon-dusty air that Armstrong and Aldrin took in were our first fleshly contact with the moon. Or were they? Walking around on Earth every day, I am surrounded by material that recently was in outer space. Hundreds of metric tons of extraterrestrial rock falls to Earth every year, some from the moon, but most from asteroids. Ejected by a high-speed impact and eventually caught by Earth's gravity. Some pieces are big enough to see, but most are pulverized by our atmosphere during entry into tiny particles that disperse in the air, becoming a tiny fraction of the very dust and dirt we clean up and breathe in every day. There's microscopic space dust, pieces of asteroids, and even the moon all around us. In fact, there might be microscopic pieces of the moon under your bed right now, or even under your fingernails. Which means the first human to have fleshly contact with lunar material was the first Homo sapien hundreds of thousands of years ago to walk on dirt. We are still studying exactly how much cosmic dust is in the air that we breathe every day, but it's safe to say that every once in a while you inhale some material that was recently in outer space, some of which thousands of years ago was on the moon. And just like other particulates in our atmosphere, large enough pieces get trapped in the mucus that protects our lungs, meaning that picking your nose is gross, but every once in a while, a booger could literally be out of this world. And as always, thanks for watching. Hey, vsauce Michael here, and when the pyramids of Giza were built, the tallest was 147 meters tall, making them the tallest things humans had ever built. And they remained that way for nearly 4,000 years. It wasn't even until the 1300s that we finally got around to making something taller, a cathedral in England. So, does that mean that the Great Pyramids of Giza are the best, tallest structures of all time? Well, to find out more, all aboard the boat. So, what is a building? Well, technically, a building is a structure in which at least 50% of its height comes from floor plates where people can live, work, chill out. It has to be habitable. Any less than that, and it's not a building, it's a tower. After the Lincoln Cathedral finally surpassed the height of the pyramids, a number of churches continued to be built that kept breaking and setting new records. The next long-term record holder was the Eiffel Tower. It was the tallest thing ever in history that we had built for about 40 years in a row. It was finally surpassed by the Chrysler Building in New York, a personal favorite, which was then quickly bested by the Empire State Building. Now, the Empire State Building is interesting in that it was the first structure ever built by man that was so tall, were you to jump off the top of it, you would actually reach terminal velocity before you hit the bottom. It was the first structure we'd ever built that was so tall, rather than just continuing to accelerate as you fell, you would actually stop accelerating because you would reach the fastest possible speed your limp body can fall at. In the mid-1950s, something weird started to happen. Humans started to build radio and TV towers. These things could be way taller than the buildings that we'd made previously that had to be habitable. And so, ever since the Empire State Building had its record broken by a TV tower, all these other famously tall buildings, the Petronas Towers, Taipei 101, the World Trade Center, the Willis Tower, formerly Sears Tower, none of them have ever within their existence actually held the title for being the tallest thing we've ever built. There was always a radio or TV tower somewhere that was taller. Up until quite recently, and for quite a while, the record for the tallest thing ever built by humans went to the Warsaw radio mast in Poland. It's visually incredibly striking because there aren't any other skyscrapers around it. It's all alone, being very tall. Well, that was until 1991, where some workers exchanging guy wires made a mistake and the whole thing started to bend and then snapped in the middle. There's no video of the event happening, but it would have been similar to this collapse, though much, much taller. After the Warsaw radio mast collapsed, the KVLY TV mast in North Dakota became the tallest still standing structure built by man. But recently, buildings have made a comeback, and to check that out, we're gonna have to travel to the Middle East.
This is the first time I've ever touched the Nile.
Ta-da! Okay, so that was me dipping my waterproof camera into the Nile. If you were to take the entire length of the Nile River and stand it up on its edge, perpendicular to the Earth, it would reach into outer space about this far. It's pretty impressive. But where does the space shuttle orbit? And where does the International Space Station orbit? This far away? This far away? Maybe this far away. Actually, if this pink, inflatable, horrible boss's ball was the Earth, the space shuttle would orbit about right there. It's incredible, but it's possible because the shuttle and the International Space Station travel so quickly. They travel so quickly around the Earth that instead of seeing one sunrise and sunset every 24 hours, they see 16. But don't be jealous. You can easily see more than one sunrise and or sunset in a day by taking advantage of tall structures. So let's take a look at the tallest structure, the current record holder for the tallest thing humans have ever built, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. The height of this building blows my mind. You can literally watch the sunset from the base of the building and then take a super fast elevator all the way up to the top and watch the same sun set again. In fact, the difference in timing between sunset at the base and the top is so significant, the Dubai Islamic Affairs Department actually had to make a ruling about when you can start and break your fast during Ramadan inside the building. People above floor 80 or higher have to actually wait to start eating 2 to 3 minutes after the people at the base because the sun hasn't yet set for those at the top. But before you head to Dubai to watch the sun rise or set twice in a day, keep in mind that the only height you actually need to see 2 sunrises or sunsets is the height of your own body. Try this the next time you're at a beach. Watch the sun rise or set over the water. Water is important because it won't have the terrain and hill issues that land does. Now let's say you're watching a sunset. Begin by laying on your stomach. Watch the sun set, and as soon as the very last little bit of the sun goes below the horizon, quickly pop up into a standing position, and voila, you'll see the sun's back, part of it's back, and it will set another time. If you take a stopwatch and record the time between the first setting and the second setting that you witness, and measure the height of your eyes when you're laying down and when you're standing, you can use those numbers to calculate the radius of the Earth. XKCD took this a little bit further by proposing the double sunset date. Take your date out to the beach in a cherry picker, and sure enough, it was calculated. Given the speed of a cherry picker, all you have to do is move about 6 feet up, and you can watch a beautiful sunset all over again. To put things in perspective, the Burj Khalifa is nowhere near as tall as Mount Everest, but the tallest structure that we could potentially build wouldn't be as tall as Mount Everest. It would be way, way taller, like into space taller. Of course, the problem with building things that are really tall is that they get heavier and heavier and have to support their own weight. But only up to a point. If a structure was so tall that it wound up at the altitude of a geostationary orbit, it would start to feel a new force, not just a gravitational force downward, but all of a sudden this new centrifugal force up and outward. And so a building that tall could be stable through tension and more than 35,000 kilometers high. This kind of structure is known as a space elevator. Unfortunately, there aren't any materials known to science today that are strong enough to make building something that large feasible, with the exception maybe of carbon nanotubes or boron nitride nanotubes. Of course, if we went to a smaller celestial body like the moon, we could build one today out of stuff like Kevlar. There are a lot of different things that we have to be wary of when we build a space elevator. For instance, how do we dodge space debris? One solution is to attach the Earth side of the cable to a boat in the ocean that can maneuver around and move the elevator away from dangerous obstacles. Another interesting point is that the taller the cable, the faster the far end of it will be traveling. In fact, if the cable is more than 50,000 kilometers long, its far end will be traveling near escape velocity, and simply walking outside could take you to the moon. But why build a space elevator? Well, because it would be awesome, but also for better reasons too. For instance, right now, in order to send a pound of material into orbit, it costs about $11,000. But with a space elevator, we could send the same amount of material into orbit for only about $100. That difference is so significant that Philip Reagan has said that the first country to deploy a space elevator will have a 95% cost advantage and will possibly be able to control all space-related activities. Yeah. All right, so here you see in the mirror Alex playing guitar while she holds a camera in her mouth and records us. Impressive. I'm here with Kristen from Barely Political. She's visiting London. And if you enjoyed this episode of Boat, check out other episodes. I've got them all up there.
And as always, thanks for watching.
Oh, and check out Kristen's channel right there.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, vsauce, Michael here. I am distorted. The pixels you are watching have been time displaced. They've been mapped onto a gradient, and the darker the region they're mapped to, the further behind they lag. The effect is really fun, but it's certainly not realistic. Or is it? Many popular digital cameras suffer from lag-induced distortion, like what you just saw, though much more subtle, usually completely unnoticeable. It's called a rolling shutter. Instead of snapping a full exposure at once, they quickly scan strips of each frame. It's usually undetectable, but when the subject changes faster than the camera scans, you get the famous jello-y, wobbly rolling shutter effect. Really fast things like vibrating guitar strings and airplane propellers are famous victims, but people can be too. Luke Mandel submitted this photo to Boing Boing. His camera scans left to right, and in this instance, managed to capture a blink, eyes closed when the scan began, and then open in the reflection scanned a fraction of a second later. But the rolling shutter effect is not just a neat curiosity. It represents a fundamental and inescapable distortion that affects everything we see, rolling shutter or not. First things first, let's talk about distortions. A hallucination is a distortion of reality when there is no apparent stimulus. If you are merely misinterpreting an actual stimulus, that is an illusion. But some distortions occur before our sense organs and minds get in the way. They are called optical phenomena. They are not the result of sensation or perception gone wrong. Instead, optical phenomena are distortions caused by the mere properties of light and matter in and of themselves. If you look up at the sky and see a giant, vivid drinking gourd, you are hallucinating. But if you see a flat, two-dimensional connect the dots Big Dipper, you are seeing an illusion. It's an illusion because those dots merely appear to be on the same plane, like holes poked in the dark roof of the sky. In reality, those dots are stars, light years apart from one another in 3 dimensions. As Celestia's brilliant free real-time 3D visualization of space shows, from different perspectives besides our own, they look a lot less like a dipper or plow. In fact, all constellations and asterisms are geocentric illusions. From a wider perspective, their outlines point inward to the single, lowly point in space that gave them their names. But you can't blame us. I mean, Earth is the only perspective any human has ever had. And even Voyager 1, the most distant man-made object, is still not even close to being far enough away for the constellations to look even remotely different than they do here on Earth. It's also not our fault, our eyes and brains' fault, that distant stars weren't included in our early Cosmic Connect the Dot game. Sure, our eyesight could be better, but optical phenomena are also to blame. If it weren't for redshifting and the inverse square law and light extinction, distant things could be seen in all their glory. The night sky would look phenomenal. Many structures up there are huge. They're just too dim for their hugeness to be appreciated. When we see Hubble telescope images of distant objects like the Helix Nebula, it's easy to think that without a telescope to zoom in, the object must just be a tiny point in the sky. But in reality, even though the Helix Nebula is 700 light-years away, it's 3 light-years across. If we could make the Helix Nebula less dim, if our eyes could take a really long exposure of it, we would see the Helix Nebula as it really is, nearly 70% the apparent diameter of our moon. This is a serious picture. That is how large the Helix Nebula would appear in the night sky from Earth if it just wasn't so dim. Our moon is tiny in the sky, by the way. It's easy to think of the moon as this huge baseball-sized thing up there in the sky, but that's an illusion. Try this the next time you see the moon. Grab a sheet of notebook paper, and you will notice that the angular diameter of the moon is the same size as a hole punched in a sheet of notebook paper held an arm's length away. Seriously, try it sometime. It shows just how cute and tiny our little moon is. The Orion Nebula would appear even larger if we saw all of its light, and the Andromeda Galaxy, just a smudge in the sky to our eyes, but if our eyes were better at collecting dim light, we would see Andromeda's true extent in our sky. Of course, our night sky doesn't look like that. Distant objects are dimmer. That's a bummer, but light still wins when it comes to speed. Light travels at the fastest speed, in fact. In a vacuum, light travels 300,000 kilometers a second. That's fast. But not really. I mean, not compared to how far apart things are in the universe. Sydney, Australia is 1/14 of a light second away from London. But the Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years away from London. To put that in perspective, let's take a light speed journey from London to Sydney. It would look like this. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Nice. All right. Here's the Andromeda Galaxy. Okay, now, relativistic effects aside, let's take a look at what it would look like to travel toward the Andromeda Galaxy at the speed of light. Are you ready? All right. 3, 2, 1, go! Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's pretty lame. Even at the speed of light, the fastest speed possible, a year from now, we won't even be a millionth of the way there. That's how far away Andromeda is. It's almost sad, in a way. But this brings us back to the rolling shutter effect. The Andromeda Galaxy is huge. It's more than 100,000 light years across, and our view of it is tilted, which means that on the plane we view it in, light from the back represents what Andromeda looked like thousands and thousands of years before what light from the front represents. Changes in its appearance reach us sooner from the front than from the back. Andromeda is rotating, spinning at hundreds of kilometers per second in some places. Now, a lag between light coming from near and far points on a spinning object results in a skewed image, the rolling shutter effect on a cosmic scale. Applied to, say, a chessboard, seeing the front ahead of the back is pretty trippy and dramatic. So, does that mean we see wobbly, funhouse mirror, rolling shutter effect versions of Andromeda and other distant galaxies? Well, technically, yeah. But the distortion is negligible. It may as well be ignored. Why? Well, the speeds used in these visualizations are not to scale. On average, yes, matter within galaxies orbits the galactic center at hundreds of kilometers per second, but galaxies are so huge, it takes them hundreds of millions of years to complete just one rotation. In other words, the lag between light reaching you from near and far points on a galaxy is nothing compared to how much time it takes matter in the galaxy to travel that same distance. In the case of Andromeda, if you insisted on seeing Andromeda as it really is, that is, corrected for any lag caused by the fact that the speed of light is finite, the most extreme points on the galaxy would only need to be adjusted by about a 10,000th of the width of any image. In this case, less than a pixel. So it's not a big deal. But it's not a nothing deal. It's real. In fact, everything we look at is in some way distorted by the fact that the speed of light is finite. Your own feet are about 5 to 6 light nanoseconds away from your eyes, which means when you look at your feet, you are seeing where they were 5 to 6 nanoseconds ago, 5 to 6 nanoseconds in the past. Of course, a delay that brief is pretty much undetectable, but it is calculatable. If it makes you feel a little sad to know that even with the sharpest mind or the best instruments, appearances still depend on where you are, that optical phenomena ensure appearances are always relative, don't feel bad. We call the people closest to us our relatives. We're really just a family. A big family of reference frames that, like a family, don't always agree, but do have plenty of cool things to look at. I'd like to thank my editor, Guy, for help with the rolling shutter effect in this video.
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly,
Hey, vsauce, Michael here. If every single one of us held hands together in a chain of unity around Earth, would there be enough of us to go all the way around the planet? There are about 7.5 billion of us, and that's a lot, but remember that many human bodies thrown together into one big pile would barely fill the Grand Canyon. This is all of us in one place. The physical bulk of all living human flesh on Earth today would only make a cone about 7,000 people tall and 2,000 across. That's it. But that's a three-dimensional shape. What if we made a one-dimensional, single-file line of people, each with, say, 1 meter of room, and we stretched that around the planet? Well, we would make it all the way around and still have 99.5% of the human population left. If we made a circle that included everyone, the ring of people would be more than 2.4 million kilometers in diameter, dwarfing the orbit of our own moon. Now that's not just a circle, that is a circool. Let's talk about circles today, specifically something that they do, roll. But what is rolling? Well, rolling occurs whenever something moves with respect to something else and is always in contact with that something else, and the contact points have instantaneous velocities of 0. That is, there's no sliding. In mathematics, the path traced by a point on a rolling object is called a roulette, French for little wheel. The center of a disc produces a roulette that's just a smooth, straight line while rolling on one, and this is why discs are good wheels. A square, on the other hand, would be bumpy, but square centers can make straight, smooth roulettes across the right surfaces. This is the principle behind square wheels, which I recently had the pleasure of enjoying at the Museum of Mathematics in New York City. Stan Wagon wrote a fantastic and famous article about wheels, which I've linked down in the description below. It's a great read. He also contributed a fantastic interactive tool to the Wolfram demonstration project that allows you to build a wheel and then find the corresponding road shape that allows it to roll smoothly. The roulette traced by a point on a disc as it rolls on a straight line has a special name. It's called a trochoid, from the Greek word for wheel, trokos. Now, trochoids can be curtate or prolate, depending on whether the tracing point is inside or outside the circumference. If the point is on the circumference, the resulting curve is called a cycloid. Cycloids are very special, and they are the star of this episode. Now, I've been working with Adam Savage a lot lately as we gear up for Brain Candy Live, our 40-city tour that I hope to see you at. Recently, I asked Adam for some help with roulettes. Adam, do you have a favorite polygon?
The whole group. I'm literally an actual big
You
fan.
can't, they're like your children, you can't
Yeah.
pick a favorite. I don't have a favorite either. I do have a favorite thing that you can do with a polygon.
Okay.
Make a cyclogon.
A cyclogon?
Yeah.
A cyclogon is an actual thing.
Yeah,
that's
it's an
not a
actual
superhero.
thing. It's an actual thing. Do we have a polygon around here? Here, here's a square, right?
Right.
Say this is a square.
Yeah.
If I take one of the vertexes of this square and I start rolling this square, and you follow where that vertex, oh shoot. Let me roll this better. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yeah.
All right. The actual path
It describes a curve.
described here, yeah, that curve is called a cyclogon.
Oh.
And as you pick polygons with more and more sides, you get closer and closer to what I want from you today,
Okay.
a cycloid.
A cycloid.
Now, I could have just done this in Photoshop and done like an animation like I normally do, but you have a shop
we can actually build this.
and you can build things.
Okay.
Why did I want to build a cycloid? Well, let me ask you this. With only gravity to move you, what's the fastest way to roll or slide from a point to some other point below, but not directly below? Would it be a straight line? Well, that would certainly be the shortest path, but when you fall, gravity accelerates you, and falling vertically a lot right away would mean having a higher top speed during more of the journey. And that can more than make up for the fact that a path like this is much longer than a straight line. But of these two considerations, accelerate quickly and don't have too long of a path, what's the optimal combination? Finding the answer, the path of least time, is called the brachistochrone problem, and it's been around for a while. Galileo thought the answer was a path that's just a piece of a circle, but he was wrong. There's a better one, and in 1697, Johann Bernoulli came up with the answer using a very clever approach. To see how he solved it, let's start with a similar problem. You are standing in some mud, and you want to run to a ball in the street as quickly as possible. Now, a straight line would be the path of shortest distance, but if you can run on pavement much faster than you can run in mud, the path of shortest time would be one in which you spend less time moving slowly in mud and more time on the surface you're fast on. The angle you should enter the pavement at depends on how fast you move on both surfaces. As it turns out, when the ratio between the sines of these two angles equals the ratio between your speeds across both surfaces, the resulting path will be the optimal, quickest route. This is called Snell's law. Light always obeys Snell's law. When it changes speeds, like when it leaves a material in which it moves more slowly, like water, and enters one in which it moves more quickly, like air, it always refracts according to Snell's law. In other words, light always follows the route that is the fastest for it to take. Bernoulli used this fact to tackle the brachistochrone problem. Light changing speed is analogous to a falling object changing speed. But of course, a falling object doesn't just speed up once, its speed is always increasing, it's accelerating. To mimic this, using light, which Bernoulli knew would always show him the fastest possible route, all he had to do was add more and more thinner and thinner layers in which the speed of light was faster and faster and faster. And, well, what do you know? There it is, the brachistochrone curve, the path of least time. Roll down a track like this, and you will beat anything rolling down any other path every time. Bernoulli was clever enough to realize that this curve can be described in another way, as a roulette. Specifically, he noticed that it was a cycloid, the path traced by a point on a circle rolling along a line. A cycloid satisfies Snell's law everywhere. To see why, I highly recommend watching this video on the brachistochrone problem. This channel is fantastic, by the way. I'm a huge fan. The visuals and explanations are top-notch. Anyway, a cycloid provides the perfect balance between keeping the journey distance short and picking up speed early. Now, I told Adam all of this, and I told him that it would be really fun to have a cycloid curve we could roll things down, and he said,
Clearly, we should start building.
we should just start building it. What we need is a circle that's of the height that we want, and then we're going to use that circle to trace
And
out
make a
the
cycloid curve. I want to do a race, right? So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
we're
yeah.
gonna look, if we're gonna do like if you have point A here and point B here, and you say that there's some kind of curve that's better than a straight line in terms of something traveling between those two, then I want to also make a straight line from A to B.
Yeah, and maybe also a really extreme curve, like that.
Right. Okay. Got some protractors there.
Ooh.
I haven't.
You have a compass extension.
I do. I have all sorts of.
I've never
little
seen such a thing. Is that it?
extra- Yeah. That connects to that, and that connects to that. That's gonna be 9. Give or take.
I almost I feel guilty that this is like a dream of mine coming true.
Oh, really?
But it's such a nerdy dream, too. It's not like, I want this, Red Ryder BB gun. It's like, I just want a curve that things roll down.
Okay, so then clearly when we're done with this is my Christmas present to you. I think I'm currently like working out a way to do this in my head that actually makes it fairly compact and not super complicated.
Yeah.
Take a blade and cut out like an inch around this whole thing.
And how are you going to do the finishing?
I'm going to cut this, unless you would like to, on the bandsaw.
You can start.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Now, that's a little bit rough, so we're going to finish it on my disc sander.
Oh, wow.
And this will just allow us to get right up to the line. That's close enough.
That's
to
pretty
run
good,
for
yeah.
us. So now you want to use this to draw a cycloid.
Yeah.
So you'll need a little hole.
That's what yeah, so that the point of our drawing implement is on the rim, not above it.
I'm doing this right inside. I messed that up. Let's try
I don't think so. It isn't.
No? You
Yeah,
think that's
it can
all right?
be- I mean, that's even better than having the rim hole because we want the line to be right on the edge.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a pattern for the cycloid curve that I'm then going to transfer to acrylic, to clear acrylic.
Great,
and that'll
great.
allow us to see things really clearly.
Yeah.
So dip this in here. And this allows you to
Right,
roll
yeah.
your cycloid, right? Because we're just doing, it is literally like that, right?
Oh yeah, see this is perfect, yeah.
Pushed against here, I shouldn't slip.
This is like a Ouija board for geometry nerds.
It is a Ouija board for geometry nerds. Okay, there we go.
It's spelled out Brachistochrone!
That's
it.
That's the curve that we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the beginning, that's the end, and this is our pattern.
Yeah,
Isn't that cool?
that's cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna end up with a piece of plywood. Let's say 3/4 of an inch thick, but it's gonna have channels table sawed out of it that travel its length, and in those channels will sit my clear acrylic curves, and it'll also have an upright that also will have the channels milled out of it on the table saw, and that will allow the curve to sit and be supported.
Yeah, a little backstop here
Easily.
at the bottom, that'll allow us to hear that they all hit at the same time.
There's a couple things going on. One is that we've got cycloid, straight line, and then we've got extreme curve.
Right, and are these, you had mentioned bending the acrylic so we could adjust the...
No,
or not
actually,
now?
I have, you'll like this. So
Okay.
the acrylic will just be a fin of acrylic, just a thin sheet of it. Traveling on that will be, and I have material for this, some Delrin or acetyl rollers that look like this. So from the side, they'll look like this. They'll look like an H,
Uh-huh.
in which the acrylic sits in there, and the roller is self-supporting on the acrylic, but rolls down it. Ah, that is tolerance. I love it.
I like those curves. While Adam and I build a real-life cycloid track, let's take some time to appreciate other kinds of roulettes. As mentioned before, trochoids are curves made by discs rolling on straight lines. But an epitrochoid is made when a disc rolls around the outside of a circle. Roll a disc inside a circle, and what you've made is a hypotrochoid. These are the mathematical names for the curves you make when using a spirograph toy. Notice that the holes don't lie on the circumference of the discs, though some do come close. There's a special name for epitrochoids and hypotrochoids traced by points on circumferences. Analogous to discs rolling on straight lines, they are epicycloids and hypocycloids. Now, if two circles have the same radius, a point on the rolling one will touch the stationary one exactly once, always in the same spot, creating a cusp. This cute heart-shaped epicycloid is also known as a cardioid. If the rolling circle has half the larger's radius, you'll get a two-cusped epicycloid, the shape of which is called a nephroid, because it apparently looks like a kidney, I guess. 1/3 the radius gives you 3 cusps, 1/4 4 cusps, and so on. As for hypocycloids, if the inner circle's radius is 1/4 of the larger's, the resulting roulette curve is called an asteroid because it looks like a star, which the ancients also thought about asteroids. 1/3 the radius, and you've got a deltoid, named after its resemblance to the Greek letter delta. 1/2 the radius, and, well, you get a straight line. This fun relationship is called a Toucy couple, rotational motion turned into linear motion. Follow a number of points on the rolling circle and you'll get the famous illusion where every individual point moves in a straight line, but the whole thing describes a rolling circle. Put a handle on it, and you've built a trammel of Archimedes, aka an ellipsograph when used to make ellipses, aka a hillbilly entertainment center when bought in Osceola, Missouri. Anyway, let's get back to Adam and I's curve comparison build.
I have a finish line.
Oh, beautiful.
There's your finish line. You ready?
I'm ready. All right, I'll count us down. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
Right? Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. 1, 2, 3.
With the
The
straight,
steep was second, straight was last.
the straight was last.
Yeah.
The shortest distance between 2 points
Was
was
last.
the slowest way to get there.
Yeah, it certainly was. Let's try it one more time.
Yep.
Because it was super close. The Brachistochrone curve was by far the winner.
Yeah.
What a mouthful of a name, by the way.
Brachistochrome.
Brachistochrone.
Brachistochrome.
Not related to the brachiosaur. I looked it up. They're different roots.
I once looked up the difference between ingenious and ingenuity, and they don't have the
And
same
they're not
root.
related.
No. All right. You
All
ready?
right, I'm ready.
Count
Okay.
it in.
3, 2, 1, go. Yeah,
Same results?
same result.
1, 2,
But
3.
these are so close, it's hard to tell.
Well, we're answering the main question, which is that the Brachistochrome curve is the fastest way to get there.
Well, a Brachistochrone curve is also known as a Todochrome curve that has another property that we should test.
Which is?
And that is, it's also
Wait.
known...
Hold on. Before you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
to this, we've established between these three curves that the cycloid-made Brachistochrome curve is by far the fastest.
It's by far the fastest.
Okay, great.
You get steep, and
Yep.
unfortunately, you pick up a lot of speed right away, but then you've got a lot of this with little acceleration.
Yep.
You go straight down, and, you know, funny enough, what you want is that perfect balance of gravity's acceleration, but also moving to where you need to be. And
That's
this
That's fascinating
shape-
to me that a geometry, which is the cycloid curve, would yield such an efficient exploitation of the forces involved.
Yeah, exactly. Because if there was no acceleration, if there was just one force in the beginning, straight line would probably be the fastest.
Right. Okay. What is the other quality of the Todochrome curve?
You just said it. Todochrome means same time. So, as the geometry and math tells us, no matter where you start an object...
Yeah. Whoop.
Whoops, the clamp just fell off.
That was your fault.
It was my fault, but also, come on, clamp.
No, it's actually.
Do you know how to do
These
this?
tables are a pain in the ass because they have these lips on them, and they actually.
Oh, that's like a
yeah,
thin...
they drive me nuts. It's actually my fault.
Good, I'm glad we got that resolved. So,
Okay.
So, I'm going to remove the straight line guy as well. So we're left with a cycloid, which is called a Brachistochrone curve, but it also has a bizarre property where no matter where I start an object on it, when I let go, they always reach the bottom in the same amount of time.
Wait a second. So if I start it here, the amount of time it takes for this to get to the end is the same amount of time it takes for it to get to the end from here?
Yeah, and the same from right here. Well,
Wow. Okay.
so starting from here, it's going to be tough because of friction.
Yeah.
Now, if you do this in software, it's perfect, but that's boring.
Yeah.
This is the real world, and maybe
Yeah.
we won't start them that low.
I mean, if we do 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
where we actually have
And I
some
feel like
gravity
we
working
could
for us.
we could probably get one to work from here. Like that, there might be a lot of friction involved, but we
let's,
could always see. We could always see. We've got enough of them. We got to
That's
peel
why
these.
we made 3 curves, so we could test this property.
And these were all cut and sanded, clamped together, so they are incredibly similar.
I will have to chamfer the edge, as I did on this one.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
we'll hit it with some Scotch-Brite and who's it? Steel wool. A little known fact that once you've torn paper off of plexiglass, it crumples into a really nice ball and can be thrown long distances.
Hey. How did they get this paper on the plexiglass in the first place?
That's a good question. I've never seen it happen.
Because it doesn't really feel glued.
Well, they've got some
Oh,
kind
there's
of
no glue
3M glue on it, right?
Yeah. I think this is going to be really cool.
I hope it's cool because in theory and practice, theory and practice are the same thing, but in practice,
I went to the University of Chicago where one of their sayings is, well, that sounds good in practice, but how is it in theory? It's the life of the mind there.
so let us see if I do one up here and you do one there, and okay, yeah. So this has got to be without this.
I think the same person should release them because then you can time it better.
So here, put that one here.
Okay. All right, so 3 different positions. This
different
one
positions.
has longer to go.
Yep.
This one has the shortest path. So who's going to reach the bottom first?
Okay,
Well,
here we go.
let's see. Release when
Intuition
you're
would
ready.
say the one in this one
Yeah.
would go first.
Yeah,
Ready?
Yeah. Pretty good.
Dude,
Pretty good.
that was awesome.
That was so
They all
nice
like
and easy.
they lined right up.
All right, let's switch it up.
Okay. Even
I think
farther
you're gonna have to be
apart.
the one to release them, because
Yeah.
otherwise it won't be easy to time.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. I
Pretty cool.
watched them lining up.
Yeah,
That's-
they line up like they're waiting for each other.
Still-
I'm gonna stand further away because I want to see the full path.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
How cool is that?
They totally line up to hit at about the same periodicity they would for here. So given the vagaries of some extra frictions here and there, they're actually hitting this at the same sort of periodicity that they are when they start at the same point. So there's that, and then is this the Todachrome curve demonstration rig of your dreams?
It really is. It really is. It's also the Brachistochrone rig of my dreams and the Cycloid rig of my dreams.
So check that out.
Keep doing that, yeah. That is really cool.
Another one. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
exactly on point.
Wow. Racia. See, in this game, no matter where you start, no matter who you are, you're always a winner.
Everybody's a winner.
There's always a tie. So this is brain candy for me, Adam.
Totally.
This is something that was previously abstract and only seen in animations and in text, made real.
Yeah.
Now I can put these wherever I want. I'm not stuck with what someone else did. I can physically hold it, and that's what makes brain candy exciting for me.
It is. It is like I love taking the theoretical and making it physical. And actually, honestly, we've always had what seemed to me like sister enterprises,
Yeah.
and it's nice to join them together.
Yeah, this is a little child of ours, isn't it? And maybe one of us wasn't so good at sanding, and maybe the other of us kind of saved the day. But it's
good.
real now,
Yeah,
and it's alive, and I think it's loving its life.
That was fun.
Hey, it was really fun. Thank you. This is my dream come true. Adam, thank you so much for your help. Working with you is always amazing. I hope to see all of you out there watching at Brain Candy Live. It's going to be incredible. And in your daily lives, may you always find the Todachrome, the solution that brings you and others together, even if you started in different places. And as always, thanks for watching.
Fly hundreds of ships as you fight, explore, and trade across a vast universe.
Hey, vsauce! Michael here. A few years ago, in Minneapolis, an angry dad stormed into the retail store Target. His daughter, a high schooler, had been receiving coupons in the mail from the store for things like cribs and diapers. Was Target encouraging his daughter, a minor, to go out and get pregnant? Well, the store apologized, but a few days later they heard back from the father. He told them, "A few things have been going on in my household I was unaware of. My daughter is due in August. I owe you an apology." You see, Target's internal algorithms had been tracking and processing his daughter's purchases, and recently she had started buying different items than usual, things like certain vitamin supplements and scent-free soaps and lotions, behaviors the system flagged as evidence she could be pregnant. Thus, they sent her the coupons. And they were right. Without being told, Target knew that a girl was pregnant before her own father. We are tracked and followed digitally now more than ever before. We live in a world of 24/7 CCTV, browser cookies, trackable debit cards and cell phones and GPS, fingerprinting and DNA analysis. But despite all of that, every single year in the United States alone, more than 2,000 people disappear and are never found again, dead or alive. Where do missing people go? How do they disappear? What if you disappeared? And how do you know you haven't already disappeared? In many cases, missing persons are the victims of unsolved or unknown crimes. They may have suffered accidents or taken their own lives, and their bodies are never found. Or they may be perfectly fine and have simply escaped their old life, old friends and family, old debt and obligations, to start a new life somewhere else, possibly as someone else. How long would it take for people to notice if you disappeared? Well, think about it. I mean, it sort of depends on who you are, how you live, and how you disappeared. In most jurisdictions, after about 5 to 7 years, if no one has heard anything from you at all, you can be declared dead in absentia. This is what happened to French astronomer Guillaume Le Gentil. In the 18th century, hundreds of people traveled far and wide to observe the transit of Venus from different locations on Earth. They knew that by comparing their measurements, they could calculate more accurately than ever before just how far away the sun was. So, Le Gentil left Paris in 1760 for Pondicherry in India. But after a storm blew him off course and the British occupied Pondicherry, he was forced to spend the day of the transit on a boat at sea, which rocked too much for accurate measurements to be taken. Now, the next transit would happen in 8 years, but after that, the next transit wouldn't happen for another 100 years. So he stuck around. He didn't return to Paris. Instead, he built an observatory and waited. When he finally returned to Paris 11 years after leaving, he found that he had been declared dead. His wife had remarried, his family had plundered his belongings, and his position at the Royal Academy of Sciences had been given to someone else. He never did see the transit of Venus, by the way. On the day that it happened, the sky above him was overcast. We know the human population of Earth. Kind of. Population figures and counters are only estimations. Individuals are best accounted for by real people in their real lives. But that doesn't always happen. Earlier this year, Janet Veal passed away in her apartment in Ringwood, Hampshire. Large portions of her body were eaten by her pet cats before she was discovered weeks later. And 7 years ago, Joyce Carol Vincent was found dead on her sofa in Wood Green. Or at least her skeleton was found. She had been dead for at least 3 years, and no one ever checked on her. Her television was still on. And 4 days after Timothy McVeigh bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City, taking 168 lives, a severed left leg was found in the rubble. No one knew who it belonged to. The legs of all the other victims had been accounted for, and no one else had been reported missing. DNA analysis showed that the leg belonged to Lakesha Levy, but she had already been buried with both her legs. So they dug up her corpse. She had been buried with someone else's left leg. The legs were swapped, but because her body had been embalmed, DNA in the unknown leg could not be analyzed. To this day, no one knows who that leg belongs to. The 169th victim remains a mystery. Some conspiracy theorists argue that the leg may have belonged to the actual bomber, someone besides Timothy McVeigh who was close enough to the explosion to be obliterated completely except for one leg. Regardless, what it does show is that it is possible for a person to disappear without anyone ever asking where they went. Sometimes people are reported dead or missing even when they aren't. Premature obituaries are common. Many living people already have one on file. If a famous person dies, the media, television, newspapers, magazines, well, they need a full story as soon as possible, so they prepare them ahead of time, locked away, leaving only the dates and circumstances of the death to be filled in. Makes sense, but it's awkward when they leak before the person's dead. In 2003, CNN's website accidentally carried draft obituaries for living people that could be accessed. It's embarrassing, but for the person reading their own obituary, it's a chance to do something that most of us never get a chance to do. See how you will be remembered after you're gone. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite. He made a fortune manufacturing and selling deadly weapons, cannons, and armaments. In 1888, his brother Ludwig died, but many newspapers mistakenly thought that he had died and published obituaries for Alfred Nobel. They weren't very flattering. One French paper declared, "The merchant of death is dead." Nobel read these obituaries and was so ashamed by what his legacy apparently was going to be. When he did die, he left almost all of his money to the cause of celebrating humanity. He created the Nobel Prize. Marcus Garvey wasn't so lucky. The story goes that after suffering a stroke, newspapers ran premature obituaries that were critical of him, saying he died broke, alone, and unpopular. Shocked by how negatively he was being remembered, Garvey suffered another stroke while reading his own obituary and died. In April of 2006, 5 Taylor University students died in a tragic car accident. Another student survived but was in a coma. She was identified as Laura Van Ryn. Her friend, Whitney Sierick, wasn't as lucky. She was pronounced dead. 1,000 people attended her funeral. But over the next few days, as Laura recovered, she began speaking. And when asked her name, Laura said, "My name is Whitney." The girls looked similar. It turned out Laura was the one they had buried. Later, Whitney was married in the very same church that years before had held her funeral. What if you are already missing and just don't know it? It's not known how often hospitals accidentally switch babies at birth. Modern hospital policies make it unlikely to happen, but because we don't all go out and get maternity and paternity tests for fun, there isn't a lot of data on the phenomenon. But it does happen. It's often discovered because of DNA tests administered to resolve child support disputes. Or, in the case of a 35-year-old woman in the Canary Islands, it's because in 2001, an employee at a store you were shopping at mistakes you for her best friend because you look exactly like her. Because she is your long-lost twin, separated from you since birth. And the sister you grew up with thinking was your twin turns out to be a biological stranger. What if you are missing, but the authorities don't know? Such is the life of the unreported missing. People in a country illegally, people estranged from their family and friends with no missing person report ever being filed, children of homeless mothers. These people